Support for the show comes from Carolina Forward, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to building a more equitable, democratic, and prosperous North Carolina.
You can learn more about their vision and values at carolinaforward.org.
North Carolina State Highway Patrol.
What cigarette do you smoke, Doctor?
A contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency of today.
Rock and roll has got to go.
And welcome back to the Hometown Holler. I'm Daniel Ayers.
And I'm Quinn Ray. Well, hey, man.
Feeling really old today.
Why's that?
Lana Del Rey's Ultraviolence turned 10 this year.
And you feel old.
I thought that was released like 3 years ago. Even though I've been listening to it for like all 10 of those years, I didn't realize it had been 10 years. And so I'm feeling a little old.
That's how I felt the other day. So Scarlett, she's really into dinosaurs. And so I was like, let's watch Jurassic Park. And so I'm scrolling.
I don't like where this is going.
Well, Jurassic Park was in 1993.
And it's held up super well.
Man.
It looks, I mean, yeah.
That's great.
I watched a YouTube video about why it looks so good. And Jurassic Park, the special effects look better than like Transformers, which came out like 15 years later.
Yes.
And there's some techniques they did, kind of like with Jaws, where it's like they didn't have the benefit. I mean, yes, they had CGI for Jurassic Park, but like rattling the camera to kind of give the feeling of the size of a T-Rex and like or like the rippling water in that Jeep as they're going
Right,
in the
right.
power's up. Anyway, Jurassic Park's great.
Billboard magic.
Yeah. Oh, it's great, fantastic. And then American Idiot by Green Day, 20 years old this year as well.
Wow.
So anyway,
So before you, how actually old are y'all?
wow.
Before I date myself.
That's a great question.
You and I are the same age.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better now.
All three of us are the same age.
There
Let's
we
say
go.
that.
There we go. But doing some research on you today, Wesley. Yeah, we're the same age.
Well, you know, I used to think we were the youngest members of the party, and now it's like, you know, the millennials' time in the sun has just completely passed us by. You got Anderson, state party chair. It's like it's all the 20s. It's all the Gen Zs now. And it's like it's passed us by.
Right on the line, so I will claim millennial when it's convenient, and then immediately jettison that and go to Gen Z whenever when Gen Z started eating Tide Pods, I was like, nah, I'm millennial.
Right.
No,
Right.
that's not me. Okay, folks. Wow. Well, you've already heard a little bit from him, but we're going to hear a lot more in just a second. Welcome back to the Hometown Holler. Today we are joined by Wesley Harris, a key figure in North Carolina politics and economics. Originally from Taylorsville in those brushy mountains. Was that Alexander County?
That is, yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Wesley represents District 105, 105. Y'all say 105 or 105 when you're on the campaign
I
trail?
usually like the 105th.
105th in the North Carolina House, and he co-chairs the North Carolina Future Caucus. That sounds kind of sci-fi-y, exciting. He brings a background in economics, holding a PhD from Clemson University, and previously he has worked in international tax consulting. Wesley is the only economics PhD in the entire General Assembly.
Wow.
That kind of blew my mind.
Once you meet some General Assembly members, it shouldn't blow your mind. shouldn't blow your mind too much. But yeah, no, it's a good, it's a nice little check mark down.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I read it. Oh, I read it, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. And then I immediately thought, that's terrifying.
right.
Wesley's also currently the Democratic nominee for North Carolina Treasurer, focusing on long-term financial planning, infrastructure investment, and state employee benefits. Wesley, welcome to the Hometown Holler.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, man.
Long time listener, first time guest. Glad to be here.
Appreciate it, dude. Let's kick things off and just one question we've asked. We've had a lot of council of state candidates on, and with the exception of like the attorney general, which I kind of had a sense of like what that job is about, but then you get to like commissioner of labor, commissioner of insurance. What the hell is the state treasurer? Like,
Right.
I mean, it's another one of those races where I know it's a big deal. I know it has a prestigious title. I know it has something to do with money. but that's where it ends for me. And I'm somebody who tries to keep up with this stuff. So.
And it's that's true for everybody. Even when I'm calling people, I'm just like, oh, hey, I'm running for treasurer. Just wanted to see if you had any thoughts about this race. And most people are like, I've never once thought about this race at all. So,
How does that make you feel?
It's a bummer in some ways, but it's also freeing in another way.
Sure,
In the
it's
sense
a blank
that,
slate.
Yeah, it is a blank slate. And so when no one knows what the job does, you can really talk about anything. You really campaign about anything because really the only people know is it deals with money.
Right.
And so you can tie that into absolutely everything. But the treasurer's role as a whole really has kind of three main roles, three main big roles, and a lot of smaller roles.
Before we get too much further into it, I just want to make sure that our mic. Can you pull your mic a little bit closer?
Yes.
Is that what you're gonna?
Yeah,
cool.
better?
That's
Okay, cool.
perfect, right
Perfect.
there. Yeah. So anyway, role of treasurer.
Yeah. So there's three main big roles of the treasurer, and then a few smaller roles. Is it runs the pension plan, so it's sole fiduciary of our pension plan, which is $120 billion, and pretty much everyone who works for the state government or local government, when they retire, their retirement comes from the pension plan. And so state treasurer, sole fiduciary of that, determine exactly how everything is invested. They get complete control over that. Second thing is that they run the state health plan. So they don't have quite as much autonomy on the state health plan. They're a member of the board of trustees, but they're the chair of that state health plan, which again, if you work for the state government, if you're a school teacher, your health insurance is run by the treasurer's office.
It's funny you say that because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I did get a lot of emails when I was a teacher from Dale Folwell.
Oh, yeah.
And about the state health plan and all that, which I will say I was kind of impressed with the state health plan in terms of the benefits I got out of it. The one I had, I got therapy covered, which was cool. Mental health benefits, which
That was when it was
surprised
Blue
me.
Cross Blue Shield, though.
Yeah, what is it now?
So
Is that done?
it's Blue Cross still, but it's
Okay.
shifting to Aetna. And so the difference is that Blue Cross and Aetna, they're actually just the administrator of the plan. So it's a self-insured plan, and so our tax dollars fully pay for the insurance. Blue Cross and then futurely Aetna is actually, they just administer the plan. And so it's the health plan and the health plan board that literally decides what's being covered and what's being not covered.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why it was such a big thing a couple weeks ago, I guess a couple months ago at this point, when they took away Wegovy and the GLP weight loss drugs. That was a decision by the state health plan board.
Because those were too expensive?
Yeah, they were too expensive. They were looking at kind of the state health plan trust fund.
So
if you
insurance
will.
companies didn't make that decision.
And that's what the treasurer would chair, that board.
Yes. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Connecting dots.
This is really, I'm learning a whole lot.
Yeah, and it's weird that it's under the treasurer's office. I mean,
it seems like an HR position.
Well,
type
it
thing.
seems. I mean, we have an insurance commissioner. you would think they would be the ones to get to do the state health plan, but no. I mean, it's under the state treasurer's office, which again makes it so of all the council of state races, the treasurer's office has a super defined constituency, and that is state employees.
Yeah.
In the sense that we control their retirement and we control their health plan. So pretty much all the benefits of, General Assembly decides what their pay is going to be, but really it's the treasurer's office that manages the rest of their benefits. And so it kind of puts all of those responsibilities under one office, which I guess kind of consolidates it. So it makes it easier. So those are the two big things. And then the third one, which I think is one of the massive things that not a lot of people know about in North Carolina, is the treasurer is the chair of the local government commission. And so we're a unique state in the sense that any local government, any county government, any municipal government that wants to debt finance anything, in order for them to do that, it has to be approved by the voters. But before it can even be approved by the voters, it has to be approved by the local government commission. And there's kind of that watchdog of all local governments to basically, it kind of works. So the state auditor is a part of the local government commission as well, but the treasurer is a chair of it. And so it's really the watchdog of local government finance across the state to make sure that, municipalities are in good shape. And if they're in bad shape, they take over the government. So I don't know if you ever watch Parks and Recreation. But Ben Wyatt, that's basically the local government commission. When they had to come in and rescue Pawnee from their fiscal crisis, that's what the local government commission does. They come in and take over a municipality if they want. But if you want to, issue any debt, do a school bond, you have to get approval by the LGC before you can even put that on the ballot. And so it actually makes public finance and makes public debt actually more affordable in North Carolina. On bond markets, there's actually something called a North Carolina premium if you talk to bond attorneys, because you have to go through that extra step of making sure your finances are in good shape, that you can actually borrow borrow money,
Yeah, 'cause
issue
it
bond,
mitigates more risk.
issue bonds at a little bit lower rate for North Carolina municipalities. And so, being someone with a public finance background and a public finance economist, that's always something that has drawn me to this role, because it's, you get to look at all these governments, helping make sure that they have the debt capacity to make these investments, and do what you can to make sure that local governments are able to make those investments. And there's this idea of what I call fiscal federalism of our county governments and our local governments spend money and tax money, but then our state also taxes and spends money too. And what you're seeing recently is a lot of local governments are really having to fill the gap of our state government not doing their job.
Okay, so I tell you, just in the few minutes we've had this conversation, I can tell that this stuff really engages you.
Oh, yeah. No, I love
this
it.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're throwing out numbers, and like I'm a couple steps behind you, but I'm catching up.
Yeah.
But this is your jam.
And you know what? It's everybody's jam. They just don't know it's their jam. But at the end of the day, it matters. Like, looking at Alamance schools and the fact that they had to be closed for a couple weeks before because of mold.
Right.
They're having to do that because the county doesn't have the money to, redo the capital needs, because they're having to fill the gaps of what the state is doing. And if you look around the state, 90 counties, we only got 100. 90 counties had to raise property taxes last year. And so one thing I desperately wish Democrats would talk more about is the fact that when they're cutting taxes in Raleigh, most people aren't getting a tax cut. Those tax burdens and spending responsibilities are simply getting shifted to our local governments.
Well, specifically when you're talking about that, I guess that's because, Falwell, when he got in 2017, he started reducing the pension's assumed rate of return. And so when that happens, with a lower rate, local governments must contribute more to stabilize or increase this funding. So numbers for you, you probably already know it, but for the listeners, so what that means is that local governments, as Wesley just said, has to increase their property taxes, which means you're probably going to get more of a homeowner's tax bill is going to be. And Falwell, get this, so Falwell's a current sitting treasurer. He is a Republican. He said that he actually acknowledges that these increases to local government pension contributions fall hardest on rural residents, low-income residents, and people on fixed income. To put a number in perspective, the pension cost from municipal governments grew by $80 million a year over 3 years. So for the past 3 years, local government has, I guess, subsidized state government because they didn't. And we can get into how they aren't investing properly. But $240 million that local taxpayers have to pay because the state's not doing their job.
So to break that down just a little bit simpler, what that means is, like you're saying, in Raleigh, folks say, hey, state taxes are going to be lower, but what ends up happening is local governments have to foot that bill.
Right.
And how they foot that bill is jacking up the property tax.
Right, because when you look at it, the state has about 7 to 10 tax levers they can pull. We got income tax, we got corporate tax, we got franchise tax, we got sales tax, we got sales and use taxes. We got all these different taxes that they can pull the levers on to make sure things are as fair and efficient as possible. On the local level, you got 2 taxes. You got property taxes and you got sales taxes.
Yep.
And you can't change sales taxes unless the General Assembly allows you to change sales taxes. And even then, it has to go to a public referendum. And, it's hard to raise taxes without people having a vote on it. And so what ends up happening is you get a property tax. Like, that's literally the only level that most county governments and municipal governments can fund. So I live in Charlotte, and so in Mecklenburg County, our county budget's over $2 billion. I mean, it's a huge county. Over 20% or almost 20% of our county budget is on operating expenses the state should be covering. And that's teacher pay. And we have to hire a lot of our own assistant district attorneys. And when you hear we hear Danny Britt talking about in Raleigh, when they're talking about the public safety budget, they're like, oh, well, we don't need to give Mecklenburg County money for district attorneys. They can afford it on their own.
Because they're already doing it.
Yeah, right. And so it gets that gap that it has to do it. And so when it comes time to spend capital needs, which again, the state is responsible for public school operating expenses, if you will, like the salaries and the benefits, but it's the local counties that are responsible for capital needs. And so if our counties are having to fill so much of the gap of what the state should be doing, that actually gives them less capacity to actually make the capital improvements that they need. And that's that's one of the critical pieces, because we talk about the Leandro plan a lot. The Leandro plan was about, again, this is a couple years ago, and so it's a little bit higher now because of inflation, but around like 2019, 2020, the original Leandro plan was about $1.8 billion to fully fund the operating expenses of our public education. Our public school capital needs, when I was elected in 2019, was $8 billion. Our school capital needs are dwarf the Leandro plan, dwarf the operating expenses. And that was in 2019. Now, I checked just before this session started, our school capital needs have risen to over $13.1 billion.
That's insane.
And so, the wealthy counties are able to afford it. Guilford just passed a massive school bond a couple years ago. Actually, ironically, so they went to the vote. They went to the LGC and they were like, "We want to do this." Dale Fall was like, "No, I don't want you to do this." And they're like, "Well, we'll raise sales tax to be able to cover it, to finance it." And so they took it to the voters. LGC ultimately approved it. Dale Fall gave them a lot of shit for it, and it was hard for them to get it through. The voters approved the bond, but didn't approve the sales tax increase.
That happened here in Alamance too.
So what's going to end up happening is their property taxes are going to go up to end up paying for it. And in Charlotte just passed the largest school bond in history, over $2 billion. And honestly, that's not even going to come close to filling those gaps. But, these growing counties are able to afford that because they're growing and because they have a larger tax base. But these rural counties, they simply, like you were saying, Gwen, they don't have the tax base to be able to fund that. And so their schools are just getting into disrepair. And again, if your schools are falling down, if your hospitals are closing, if you still don't have access to internet, your community isn't growing, it's dying. And that, when you look at, why are people getting radicalized so much, it's because they're being left behind.
Oh, 100%.
And, they're angry. And they have reason to be angry because their government isn't there for them. And these are areas that if we just go there and we talk about these things, we show them that we're the party that believes in them, that believes in their potential. If we're just willing to invest in them, that's a game changer politically. And we can finally start winning back some of these seats and show them what can happen when you have a government that invests in them. And I think that is the critical piece that this year we have the potential to do if we go to every corner of this state and we show people what we actually stand for. And again, that's why I said this is everybody's jam, because everybody depends on that public school system in their county. Everybody depends on making sure you have those infrastructure investments, because that is the backbone of the economic development of every single county. And so everyone depends on it. Yeah. And it all comes back to public finance and how these things are being paid for and where the money's going.
So how, as the role of treasurer, can you help in this? Because so you work independently from the governor. You don't have to necessarily. You can make rules like rolling back the pension without the General Assembly's blessing. So what can the role of treasurer do, which will lead us into, what are some of these challenges? I mean, you kind of went over these challenges that we're facing.
Yeah. And so the big thing is, particularly with the pension plan, you get control over the investments. And, the biggest thing with our retirement system in recent years is we haven't been able to give a cost of living adjustment. And we haven't been able to give a cost of living adjustment because we simply haven't had the returns. Again, our pension plan is about $120 billion, and we pay out about $7.1 billion a year in benefits. And so that's basically a minimum return of about 6%. Basically, you get above a 6% return, the entire system remains solvent, which, again, last year, I think the S&P 500 had a rate of return of over 13.5% versus our retirement system had a rate of return of 5.5%.
So what does it mean when it's the state pension fund's 1 year return was in the 94th percentile?
Does that mean that we are in the bottom 5% in terms of performance?
We're in the bottom. You look at the last 5 years, the last 10 years, we have the worst performing pension plan in the entire country. And it's because we just have 14% of our pension fund sitting in cash.
That doesn't grow money.
No, it's losing money because we're in an inflationary period. And so, most other pension plans have that about 2 to 3% max.
What percentage is it in cash?
14%.
And I think we're supposed to be in our codes, I guess, right? Is 1%.
Yeah.
Is what we're wanting to keep.
And
as
so
a state.
we literally could invest an extra $10 billion and still have a larger cash buffer than almost any pension plan in the country. And you just invest that in average returns of the stock market. You only have to go super risky. You don't have to go crazy private equity companies and that are coming around like pirating our entire economy. Just, index funds. And we would have literally over $1 billion in extra returns that would be able to be pushed back into our system, that could give a cost of living adjustments, that could show state employees and potential future employees that don't worry about your retirement, we got your back, which can help us actually recruit folks to come in and want to devote their lives and career to the state government. But we're not doing that.
Which in turn would stimulate the economy,
right.
putting more
And so
money
when you're in
into
college now and you're looking around at like, do I want to become a teacher? Do I want to become a state employee? You're like, well, the pay's not great.
and the pension sucks.
Yeah, the pension sucks. I don't have a promise that it's going to keep pace with my cost of living once I retire. Health plan may not be that even great whilst I'm working, and you don't even get health insurance when you're retired anymore. And it's no brainer. And so, if for state employment, you're never going to get paid top dollar. That's why they call it public service. And so the bargain that you always make with folks is you're never gonna get rich working for the government, but we will take care of you. We will give you the benefits you need, and we will give you a great retirement.
My grandfather was a firefighter in Greensboro, and just like you said, that guy he was never going to get rich doing that, but he had a retirement that I was a North Carolina teacher. Now I do a weird. I'm still a teacher, but I realize you can make just as much money, which is not saying a whole lot, being a private tutor. And so I primarily do that now. But my grandfather, when he was a firefighter, yeah, like you were saying, this was back in the 70s and 80s, and he was taken care of very well, and by no means affluent, but was able to put his kids through college, was able to pay off his home, and when he needed health care, when he got sick, he was able to have that. It blows my mind that if we hired a financial advisor and they were losing this badly compared to the market, we would ask for our money back.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm just if the market's up 13% and I give my money to a guy and he it goes up 5%, well, really even less than that because of inflation, I maybe end up losing money. I would be irate. Like how do people not know about this?
Yeah, and it's complicated in the sense that state employees are fairly risk averse.
Sure.
In the sense that, you want to make sure that your investments are safe. So you don't want to go super risky. And that's really how Treasurer Falwell has sold this in a lot. He came in really hitting Janet Cowell about, all your money's going to Wall Street money managers. And 'cause, again, Richard Moore and Janet Cowell, they did spend a lot more money on Wall Street money managers, but they also got better returns. And, money managers don't make money unless they get good returns.
So this was pitched as like a conservative, lowercase c conservative.
I'm going to save you money by getting rid of the money
Exactly.
managers.
And again, that's when he talks to these folks, that's what he harps on. Just like, this is how many millions of dollars I've saved y'all in management fees. But when you look at millions of dollars on a $120 billion pension plan,
Nothing.
It doesn't add up a lot.
Especially
and so,
when you can get billions in return.
Right. And again, and the other argument is things look bad when it's in an up market, but when it's in a down market, it looks great.
Sure.
And so Treasurer Falwell does an awful lot when he points back and be like, well, if you look at the first couple months during COVID, when the stock market crashed.
April of 2020 was looking real good.
North Carolina we lost the least amount of money. And so that was great, but that was also a 3-month period in an 8-month reign. And
man, talking all this money about not that we're losing has got Daniel drinking gin again. Just poured him a nice
I do that anyway.
glass.
And so, but back to your original question. Yeah. Sorry, we always get sidetracked. But what can the treasurer do? So aside from just investing smarter, so we have extra money that we can actually make our pension plan solvent is. It's really the bully pulpit of going around. Again, it's the local finance kind of watchdog. And so having, a preventative look around a local governments to making sure that they don't get into bad shape. Because a lot of times you get these rural counties where, there's probably not a qualified CPA in a lot of these super small towns, particularly in rural North Carolina. And so they don't have the capacity to do audits. And keep track with their finances. And so it's really easy to get in trouble. You see the taxes, you see the spending, and you know what your community needs. You're like, well, let's spend. And you get into trouble really quickly. And too often, the state doesn't come in until it's way too late. And then when they come in, the only prescription we have is we got to cut. You got to cut. You got to
Right.
cut. And so being a little bit more proactive on that and working with these local governments, and there's a lot of local governments. And so this is one of the issues when we talk about state government staffing of, I think, the auditor's office and the state treasurer's office really need to have more people so that we can go out and help these local governments. Because again, if there's not qualified CPAs that can do audits for these small towns, then the state needs to have them in the state auditor's department.
Especially if the state requires.
Right, exactly. We need to staff them up. And so what's actually ended up happening last year, we passed a bill, pushed forward by the treasurer, that if a municipality is late on their audit, their sales tax revenue is actually withheld from the state. And so not only are they in bad financial situation, because again, some of these municipalities are 5-10 years late on their audits,
Right.
which is a problem we need to fix. But it's not maliciously they're late on the audits. It's they simply don't have a lot of
Don't have the resources.
Yeah, a lot of these accounting firms won't even pick up these local governments as clients.
I mean, we just put out there to bid for the town of Elon, our auditor, and we just approved it. Same auditor that we've had for the past, 15 years. But nobody bid on it but them.
Yep.
And it's like, wow. And I think our finance officer said there's only like 26 firms across the state that will do municipal audits.
Yeah.
Like, that's scary.
Yeah, it is. And so, they need audits.
Yes.
People need to know that they're in good financial position. Because, I peruse my emails, and every couple of days I get an email from the state auditor's office. And, by the time the state auditor comes knocking, things are usually pretty bad already. And so, you can't let them get that bad before. But to do that, the state needs the resources to help these communities. And then, again, going out and letting people know what's happening to this tax system that we have, of who's paying for what and where it's all coming from. Because I think that's the biggest problem of people don't realize what's happening. Again, when your local governments are raising property taxes, you need to look and say, okay, well, why are we having to raise property taxes? Like because again, these services need to be provided. And in a lot of situations, people demand these services to be provided. And you need to say, okay, well, if this county wasn't doing all this stuff that the state should be doing, would we need this property tax increase? And in a lot of situations, the answer is probably not. And just going around these communities being like, listen, you're not getting so-and-so service because these folks are choosing for you not to get so-and-so service. And I think if people have that knowledge, which I think the treasurer's office is a unique position to go around the state and let people know about that, they can hold their elected officials much more accountable. Because, the number one employer in 61 of our 100 counties is some state agency. In 51 counties, it's the school system.
There's a factoid.
Yeah, and in a couple more, it's the prison system. If you actually look around the state, the number one employer, it's either the school system, prison, Walmart, or a hospital. Like that's those four employers are usually the number one employer in almost every single county. And so, if you don't pay salaries and you don't do good benefits, that's a backbone of most of these communities that isn't getting, the economic boost that they need. And so it all ties together. And I think going around and showing people what's actually happening to their money, I think can pay just dividends for people just having more knowledge about this and being able to hold their elected officials accountable. And so I think that is the key thing that the treasurer's office can really do so that people know. And again, if you know what's happening, you can hold people accountable because of it.
Can the treasurer invest for the state and use those returns on anything in the state budget?
So no. So the returns, again, it has to be approved by the General Assembly. But again, the General Assembly hasn't been given cost of living adjustments because there's simply not enough money in the pension plan right now. And so the General Assembly can actually supplement all of that, which ends up is probably what's going to be needed in a couple of years if we don't change something, particularly with the state health plan. That's something that, that all comes from tax revenues. And so, the treasurer doesn't invest state health plan money. That comes from the General Assembly.
Okay.
And so it still needs some support from the General Assembly. But again, the General Assembly responds to the voters. And that's one of the things that's concerned me so much, just politically in general, of our geographic divide, of our urban-rural divide, that until we get people in all parts of the state that, again, you can be Republican, you can be Democrat, but when it comes to state employees and it comes to paying our teachers and our state employees, We need to make it so that if you do not support state employees, if you do not support their benefits, if you do not support their retirement, that you are unfit and unqualified to hold office in North Carolina. And the only way we can do that is we got to get them all together. And we got to use that kind of political leverage. And that's why it's important that you compete everywhere, that you have people running in races absolutely everywhere, because people need to know there are alternatives. And because that at the end of the day, that's the only way we're going to be able to save our system and make sure that it remains solvent.
So let me try to connect some dots then. So the pension plan that that the treasurer invests in and gets returned on, the General Assembly is also helped supplementing some of that with tax dollars. So theoretically, if the treasurer was investing instead of putting it all in Folgers cans in the backyard, there would be more tax dollars that could be going to infrastructure or teacher pay.
Right. Because again, a portion of your paycheck, if you're a state employee, a portion of your paycheck goes directly into the pension plan. And so if you get better returns, that's less money they have to put in, which again frees up that budget constraint on everything else. And what else it does is, if the benefits are good, again, one of the key reasons
Why do they think sitting on cash is good right now?
It's wild. But
I mean, like you said, you're the only PhD economist in Raleigh, and it shows.
Well, and I'll say this: it's easy to look at the cost side of everything,
and not the investment,
and say the costs need to be lower, and that's really what a lot of Republicans in general look like. Is we need to cut costs. We need to cut costs. There's two sides to every equation. As an economist, it's cost benefit. There's a cost to everything, but then there's also a benefit to everything, and you have to make sure that the benefits exceed the costs. And so if you're cutting costs, but that leads you to cut benefits by more than you cut those costs, then you're on the negative. You're on the whole, you're going to lose. And so what's made things super unstable is, again, we have a 25% vacancy rate in state employment in North Carolina. And so that's people, 1 out of every 4 positions that the state needs to hire is empty. They can't hire. And so what ends up happening there is you get younger folks who are not wanting to work for the state government anymore. And so our existing pool of state employees are getting older and they're getting sicker. And a retirement system depends, just like Social Security, retirement system depends on younger people buying into that system and spending 30, 35 years working through the system, buying into that system so you can actually get bigger returns and pay it off. Versus, same thing with the state health plan. Again, one of the things with Obamacare, the biggest thing was the individual mandate. Because if you're going to cover pre-existing conditions, that increases the risk pool. That makes insurance more expensive, and you have to offset that with healthy people buying in, of basically not waiting until they get sick or until they get older to buy insurance, buying in when they're younger so that they're paying in on a yearly basis while they're healthy, while they're not really consuming a lot of health care, so that we make it sustainable. And so that is the biggest thing of when we don't provide the benefits we need, additionally to not giving the salary increases that we need, it further makes the entire system unstable. And so that's why we're really at that critical point right now of something's got to be done. If it's not going to be done on the salary side, then it has to be done on the investment side, and it has to be done on the benefit side to just kind of keep this together, because you need people to want to be teachers. You need people to want to be state employees, because they are the tool. It doesn't matter what laws you pass or what policies you pass in Raleigh.
If your trash don't get picked up,
you need people. You need people to go out there and actually implement it. You need state employees. They are the manifestation of what Raleigh wants. And so if you don't have good people working for the government, then it's impossible to have government that works for people.
If you could have the nicest tires, but if you don't have gas in the car, you're not going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
and you're right. Like I think demography is destiny, right? Demographics tell the full story when it comes to this issue. I'm curious. I mentioned this earlier. You do have a passion for educating folks and for talking about this. When you're treasurer, do you have a plan to kind of continue that with kind of a public awareness campaign so that more folks know what the treasurer is up to, what the treasurer is about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's actually one thing that Dale Falwell's done a really great job at. Particularly with the local government commission. He actually has LGC meetings all across the state. Sometimes he uses them to be super petty. There was a project Wilmington wanted to do, and he didn't think Wilmington should do it. They had the money, city council approved it, the people wanted it, but he was like, no, I don't like this. And so when it came time for Wilmington, it's on the coast, folks, to present their proposal to the local government commission, that day he held that local government commission meeting in Boone.
No.
so the people in Wilmington had to drive up to Boone. So it's a good thing that you can go around all around the state, but it can be used for
that's petty AF.
For petty things. But again, showing people what's happening and going around, having forums, having question and answer sessions with local press. Because I'll say one thing, even in Charlotte, our local press, and we're a big city. We got good news. They don't know state representatives exist. Right. They don't know state senators exist. You go to Raleigh and you're forgotten. But they cover city council every single week.
Who just spent $650 million.
And that is on the news every day. And so being accessible to those, because again, it matters. People's local tax dollars matter, and people get real pissed about that real quick. And so getting the treasurer to really tap into those local news sources can just keep that on people's minds a lot and really open up the idea of what's going on the state level and how that's impacting what's going on their local level.
Well, I think we're coming up on time. So just a couple other closing questions for you, Wesley. So when you're not in the GA, when you're not traveling across the state campaigning
or reading policy papers,
right, seeing what the stock market doing in the S&P 500. What do you enjoy most about North Carolina? What do you do?
I just love North Carolina. It's an amazing state. I'm from here originally. I got, as I like to say, my mom was a local public school teacher her whole career. My dad was a banker, and so anyone who thinks I wasn't destined for this job, put a banker and a state employee together, and that's the treasurer's job.
I could have guessed it.
Yeah, and so I got a big family. I got 3 sisters, and so they're all married. They have 2 kids. Personally, I'm not married. I don't have any kids, and so love spending time with family, doing that. And actually, I'm a huge history nerd. And so, going around, that's one of my favorite things about campaigning around this state. You've got to go to corners of this state that I've never been to, that, off the beaten path, and really learn some really cool things about North Carolina. And so, I love that. I love history museums. I love reading about history and all that.
What's the guilty pleasure?
Well, you just touched my obsession, which is history. I'm curious if you have a favorite moment in North Carolina history, a favorite historic site around the state.
Oh, God. Oh, that's a good question.
Or at least favorite. I'll tell you right now, I Charles B. Aycock birthplace. Man, my grandmother drugged me there in middle of July. I don't need to go back.
Right. So I grew up in Statesville, and so Statesville is
Fort Dobbs?
Yeah, Statesville's home to Fort Dobbs, which I believe is the only French and Indian War state historic site in the state, maybe even the eastern seaboard. People forget about the.
Oh, dude, it's epic.
I actually wrote an email about this right before 4th of July for our campaign, and I was actually upset that people weren't as excited about it as I thought. Because I wrote a Venus flytrap email today,
and people just went.
People
crazy.
loved it.
Yeah.
People went crazy over it. Which again, why wouldn't you? The state carnivorous plant.
It's pretty gnarly.
But the French and Indian War is an epic changing war.
Dude, have you seen Last of the Mohicans?
Yo, God, yeah.
Who hasn't?
Yeah,
You'd be surprised.
I mean, so we talk about World War I as kind of the harbinger of World War II, and basically the entire rest of the 20th century was just recovering from what World War I was and how the Treaty of Versailles put into motion the rise of fascism, the rise of communism, all these things across Europe.
Man, y'all's eyes locked on history right
The
now.
French and Indian War did the exact same thing. Yeah. It was started by George Washington wandering around in the woods. He literally started a world war. 20-year-old George Washington just dicking around
with his wooden teeth
in the Ohio River Valley and started a world war. Afterwards, after the Treaty of Paris of 1763, Great Britain was like, well, we're out of money. Mm-hmm. We just had to fight a world war for you guys.
And you can't go west of the Appalachian Mountains.
and so we can't afford to protect you anymore. So, you can't go over the mountains anymore, and we're going to charge some taxes on you to pay for this world war that y'all started. And we're like, I'm sorry. We didn't have any say for that, and literally that sparked the American Revolution. It's the exact same story.
It is the Phantom Menace of our trilogy, right? If the Revolutionary War is Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, this is the Phantom Menace.
Every saga has a beginning. Every journey has a first step.
Oh my God.
And the first step of America was the French and Indian. We can do a whole podcast.
So, well,
on that.
we're
feel
about
free,
to.
Feel free to bring me back anytime.
Well, we're about to, because we hope you'll stick around for the back porch, so we can keep running our mouths about this. But we're gonna close this episode here. Wesley, thank you so much for coming on the Hometown Holler. We have a guest. We have a guest. That's you. We have a special gift for our special guest. And we have some incredible friends here in Alamance County, some friends down at TS Designs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're an apparel company. And from dirt to shirt, it is all North Carolina.
Oh, man, I love it.
It's incredible, right? It's like a 700, 800-mile supply chain compared to the average, which is like 20 or 30,000 miles for your average T-shirt. So they've hooked us up with some awesome shirts. They're shirts that I tell folks you can feel good in them and you can feel good about them. And they're sexy little things. So we're gonna get you one. It's got the
man,
Hometown Holler
fantastic.
logo.
Oh, no, that's fantastic.
And folks, thank you for listening. We hope you will consider becoming a sustainer of the podcast. These episodes, it's a labor of love. We have a lot of fun doing this, but Quinn, it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, we both have lives outside of this. So behind every episode, it's hours and hours that we're not spending with our family, that we're not spending
No doubt.
at our jobs. So if you believe in what we're doing, if you think having these conversations with candidates, with change makers in our state and local communities, if you think that's important, we would be so grateful for your support, and you can help us keep making North Carolina a better state, one conversation at a time. Did I miss anything, Quinn?
Yes, we would be remiss to ask Wesley, where can the listeners check in on you?
Absolutely, yeah. You can check in our website. It's harrisfornc.com. You can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, all that jazz. Just Wesley Harris for NC. And thank y'all so much. This is great. I love that y'all do this, and I'm honored to be able to be a part of it. It was a great time.
Well, stay tuned to the back porch. Thanks, Wesley.
Yeah.